Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. I was going to say welcome. Thank you for joining us. It was a weird phrase in my head, but I've been doing too many of these, guys. Well, I'm so excited to have you here. My name's McKaylee. I'm with Tattered Cover Bookstore. I want to thank you guys for spending your Friday evening with us. We're so enamored by the response that we keep getting with these virtual events, because Tattered Cover is a local independent bookstore here in Denver, Colorado, if you don't know that already. But we're known for being a community space. And we often come together at these events at one of our 4 locations. And the fact that we can't physically be in the same space together still doesn't mean that we can't be together virtually and create this community virtually. So thank you guys for joining us and for continuing to support us. Shopping locally is one of the best things that you guys can do for small businesses and your community here during this pandemic and this health crisis that our nation is facing. And we wouldn't have made it without you. We still would not be making it without you. And we wouldn't be able to bring fabulous authors like the one that we have tonight in order to come and talk to you without you. So thank you for shopping locally and supporting local businesses and continuing to engage with us in the community. I really appreciate it. And I know that a lot of my coworkers do. And, even our author tonight and I were talking about it beforehand, how it's such a mutually beneficial relationship, but you're the third component, our community. So thank you for that. I want to just let you know we have several events coming up in February. We're celebrating Black History Month with amazing events that we have, including Sadiqa Johnson with her historical fiction Yellow Wife, and that's going to be tomorrow. We have other events, such as for anybody who might have some kiddos that want to watch a virtual event, we have Rio Cortez, who's going to be presenting the ABCs of Black History, and that's Thursday, the 4th. We also have Bevy Smith in conversation with Sherry Shepard on Wednesday, the 3rd. So check out our events calendar at tatteredcover.com/events, and we'll be excited to see you there. But I also want to let you know that closed captioning is enabled for those who might need it on this video. All you have to do is hover your mouse over the video you're watching me on, and there'll be a button that says CC on it. If you click that button, closed captioning is enabled for those who might want it or those who might need it. So I want to let you know that our website is open 24/7. If you want to order books from us, if you're like me and you want to stay shopping in your pajamas, that's the best way to do it. Or if you're one of the amazing people who's joining us who may not be local to the Denver metro area, thank you for shopping online with us. However, if you are in the Denver metro area, you can come and visit us at one of our locations as long as you're wearing your mask over your nose and your mouth. Pointing at the wrong things, over your nose and your mouth. You can come visit us for about 90 minutes or so and get yourself a copy of books, I don't know, like What Waits for You, which is what we're talking about today with author Joseph Schneider. So just a little bit about Joseph. Joseph Schneider lives with his wife and 2 children in California. His professional affiliates include the Magic Castle and the Imperial Society of Teachers of Dancing. What Waits for You is his second novel. And we're here to talk to him today about What Waits for You, his author career, and I've gonna ask some questions about magic and dancing too. So it's my honor to welcome Joseph Schneider. We're gonna have him turn on his video. Here he is on it. Look at him. Hi.
Hello. And thank you again so much for having me. Your hospitality means the world to me. And thank you to all of you joining us this evening. This is very exciting for me. This is the first time I've done this, and it's a real thrill.
Really? Congratulations. Yeah. Thank you for having us for your first virtual author event. That's awesome.
Of course.
Well, tell us about your latest book. This is your second novel. And yeah. I have questions about like first novel, second novel. We'll get into that. But what is this one about?
Well, so this is a tricky one to describe, because while the plot seems to be fairly cut and dry, it's basically about a city under pressure. Mm-hmm. And I write about Los Angeles. It's my spiritual home, even though I'm not there right now. I do miss it very much, but it's where I was born and raised. So I write about LA. I love LA. And so this is about what happens when a city is under pressure from, in this case, a series of murders, and what the political response is in City Hall, within the police department, how the citizenry reacts to this, and essentially how my hero, my detective, who is an unconventional fellow, raised
Just a little
in
bit.
yeah. How does he manage to try to undo the damage and triumph within this very challenging moment in Los Angeles? And it's also, the city is suffering in my book, suffering from homelessness, which it isn't right now. It's a very, very sad thing, and we're doing our best with it down there, but it's a real challenge. And I also throw in some earthquakes and something called valley fever, which we're very privileged to get down in Los Angeles. It's this spore that comes out of the desert, and that sounds like science fiction. After an earthquake, it basically comes out of the ground, and it causes all kinds of really unpleasant symptoms. So I threw that in the mix too.
Yeah, just toss a little earthquake, toss a little valley fever, toss a little serial killer, no big deal. No, but it's such an intriguing book, and like you mentioned, your hero, right? And I would love to start with him. And we were introduced to him in One Day You'll Burn, which is the first book in his criminal series, his debut, your debut. And so I want to talk about, how did he come to you? How did you create this character and sort of push through the noise of all of these detectives in the mystery series? What made you latch on to him, and why is he different?
Oh, thank you. That's an excellent question. It was a very deliberate choice. Everything I did in constructing the character was all based on how I could turn a weakness into a strength. And the weakness comes from the fact that I don't have a law enforcement or military background. I don't have I don't have ready access to at the time I didn't have ready access to technical advisors. I didn't have experience in journalism. So I was starting from a place of serious disadvantage and writing about a world that I was really passionate about because I wanted to tell mystery stories. And so I basically tried to come up with a character who was in a similar situation, essentially an academic who found himself disenchanted with sitting on the sidelines and he got idealistic, wanted to make a difference. And he felt that was the way to do it, was to solve murders. And so he is my way in as an outsider, because he's learning as I was essentially at the same time. So that's why I couldn't compete, because I just couldn't compete with the established genre heroes. There's no way I could write those guys in a convincing way. They would have smelled. It would have stank to high heaven if I had tried. You know what I mean? People would have spotted it. They would have said, "Oh, that doesn't feel authentic." But yeah. I can write the nerdy guy pretty well.
And that's what I was gonna say. Nerd is a compliment. I love how nerdy he is, and I think it is such a strength. And I love that you talk about that and how it can mirror your own life. They talk about write what you know, which leads me to, why mysteries? You have such a colorful, sordid history with theater and dance. We were talking about that before we went live, but why mystery stories? What drew you to that genre?
Well, I'm fascinated with mysteries in the sense that they're basically magic tricks. They're structured in a similar way, actually. Yeah, sure. If every magic trick, even the really short ones, have a story. They have a beginning, middle, and end. And the way the method is obfuscated or occulted is very similar to that of a mystery. The structure is almost identical. The only difference is, in a good magic trick, the method itself isn't revealed. In a good mystery, the method must be revealed, and it must provide satisfaction. But I actually, I find most mysteries problematic structurally, and it's something I fight with when I write them, because I actually find the whodunit model to be less satisfying than the how catch 'em model.
Okay.
And so I try to find a way, and I'm not always successful, of blending the two somehow, because in my opinion, suspense and reader interest are precious, right? And I believe that more suspense can be achieved if the reader actually has some more information than the detective. Not always, but in many cases, Yes. In fact, Hitchcock said that. He said, mystery is when the detective knows more than the audience. And I'm butchering this quote, but suspense is when the audience knows more than the detective.
Yes. That's why when everybody puts mystery and thriller together, I have such a headache about it because I'm like, they're
Mhm.
actually two different things.
They are two
But
different things.
that's my nerdiness talking. So I
100% true.
love that you equated magic to mystery
Mhm.
and equating that storytelling. You obviously have such a storytelling background. Where did that start? When did you get bit by the bug, so to speak?
Well, I was very lucky. Every now and then people are born with just the right set of parents, and I was born with parents who were writers themselves. They met actually way back on the Incredible Hulk back in the 70s.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Sorry. That's exciting.
No, they did. So they met on that show. Their agent introduced them. They were pretty young at the time, in their late 20s. And then, so by the time I was kind of coming of age, they did a couple shows, and then they did Northern Exposure in the 90s. They did, they worked on The Sopranos. And so now they're on Chicago Med, and they're going to their 7th year. So when I was a kid, they showed me all these great movies. And when I was 5, Frankenstein was my favorite movie, the original with Karloff. And they encouraged me to dress up as characters, and they would tell me stories, and they would read me books. And we had lots of books, always books. Just surrounded by books makes you curious about them, And so they, I owe everything. I owe everything to their support, because they didn't tell me to be practical. and occasionally that was a problem for me, because I ended up suffering. But you have to suffer. You have to suffer. I maintain that no great art has ever come out of luxury. I don't think it can. And not that I've produced great art, but I don't believe I could have even done what I have done if I hadn't gone through my wretched and very difficult 20s. But yes, my parents, when I got to be 12, they said, okay, we're going to start showing you the real ones now. So when I was 12, boom, 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 The Godfather, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Chinatown, Five Easy Pieces, like the entire year, Terms of Endearment. It's just like they showed me all of these great movies. And so, and they would talk afterwards. We'd have discussions like, well, why does that work? They would talk to me about threading in plot points, setup and payoff, the importance of conflict. My mom, she told me when she got started, she wrote the word conflict, just put it on her wall right above her computer. And I try to think about that when my scenes aren't working.
Mm-hmm. There's one book that I read once that there were like two authors having a conversation, and they were arguing whether plot or character was more important. And a third author came in and said, no, conflict is most important, tension, yeah. and that pull. And I love that you were taught from that for an early age. So what advice would you give authors trying to work through those scenes? What do you tell yourself, or is it something your parents might have told you? How do you work through that writer's block? Is it always going back to conflict? Is there something else there in your process?
Yeah. I don't remember who originated this quote, and I know my parents were paraphrasing it when they told it to me, but you chase your character up a tree, and then you throw rocks at him. How can you maximize discomfort? How can you make your character as uncomfortable as possible? How many obstacles can you throw in the way? James Scott Bell, the author James Scott Bell, did a very just a really terrific course that you can get on the Great Courses, which put out by the Teaching Company. He did one on novel writing that I really recommend. And there was something he said in there. He talks about a scene in The Fugitive where just getting Harrison Ford out of the hospital without getting caught, and all of the things that they threw in the way. And I'd never really thought about it that way before. And I thought, well, wait a minute, I could be missing opportunities to heighten suspense. So I try to think about that. How can I increase the difficulty? I also, I also have an ideal audience in mind when I write, and that can sometimes solve some of those problems for me. If my parents are my ideal writing audience. So if I think that something is vague, or that they wouldn't get it, then I explain it. If I think they would get it, I don't explain it. If I think they'd be bored, or call bullshit on it, pardon, I would change that too. You have to develop a very strong BS meter, or otherwise it just doesn't. You let yourself get away with too much.
So talking about your BS meter and crafting these mysteries, right? Because you have to commit the crime and solve the crime, right? That's what they always talk about when it comes to mysteries. So what does that planning process look like for you? How does that work? You talked about, being, because obviously your reader is going to be able to call you out if you don't have a good mystery, or you can solve it within 5 minutes. So how does that plotting process work for you?
Oh boy.
I think that's every mystery writer's answer when they ask.
With great difficulty. I guess I'm still, I think, in my nascent stages of development as far as process is concerned. I'm always trying to figure out how to improve it, and maybe you never reach the end. Maybe you're always improving it. But for me, basically, what I do, I use Scrivener, which really helps. I don't think most people know about it. I didn't even start using it.
Campaigns.
I'm sorry, what?
I use it for my D&D campaigns.
Okay, so you know how great it is.
It's awesome.
It's awesome. And I tell people that, I'm like, no, you have no idea. It'll change the way you write. And it does, because it has each chapter is its own discrete file essentially within it. And so it allows you to structure much more effectively. But I haven't been doing that long enough to really say that's my method. But what I can say is this: I write what's called a beat sheet. And in television and movies, yeah, you're nodding, so you've heard of it, is beating out each, and because you're in theater, right?
Yeah, because I'm in theater. That's exactly what it is.
Right, yeah, as you know, then a beat is a discrete unit of action, right? And so a story could have, a short story has, 10, 12 beats, and then a longer story more, and a novel has about, maybe 50, 60 beats. And you beat them out, and they're not chapter breaks, they're action breaks.
Yeah.
And then so I label them. I label them by chapter and then action break. So I'll have 1.1, 1.3, 2.5, and then I have a separate sheet that says to thread in. And so you have to drop in a certain number of clues or people feel cheated. And if you drop in too many, then obviously you've overdone it. So I have a thing that says to thread in, and I put in bold when those plot points are threaded in.
Nice.
And so I keep track of them with the beat sheet, and that's how I do it.
I love that. That's like Joseph Schneider's school of plotting. That's so great. No, it's true, to get the details, and not every author is so honest about that. So thank you.
Oh, sure.
I want to shift the conversation a little bit to inspiration and to and I know that not every author likes the idea of where do you get your ideas, but for mysteries specifically, there's I don't know. I feel like mystery writers are always trying to come up with a new way to kill somebody, right? Or something.
Definitely.
So for you,
yeah, where
does that come from? Where does your research start?
Well, gosh, these are such great questions.
Oh, thanks.
My research, is to me the real pleasure of the writing process. It's the real reward, because you have no idea if anyone's going to like what you do, or even if you do finish with it, if anyone will even buy it, or even a publisher, right? Mm-hmm. So the least you can do for yourself is enjoy the research and learn something that you've never learned, and meet new and interesting people. So I try to really immerse myself in the research as much as possible, and I do get ideas from that. As far as inspiration for the bigger stories go, I usually actually start with a theme, which I know sounds kind of odd, but essentially I think, well, what does this mean beyond the plot? What am I trying to say anything? I hope so. Well, what am I trying to say? Well, so my first book is really kind of about the destructive power of dreams, and how dreams and fantasy can take you to some pretty dark places. And LA, is kind of a graveyard graveyard of dreams, as much as it is a
Well, that's a title for a book if there isn't one.
there
Graveyard.
you go, right there. As much as it is a greenhouse of dreams, I guess it is also a graveyard. So, and my second book is about the toxic nature of violence and how it spreads and how it feeds on itself.
Mhm.
And the third book that I'm working on now, and is doing a month, oh, man. Yeah.
Oh no, I can't feel, man. There's so many authors in your shoes right now.
Yeah, yeah, it's amazing how every other task in the house feels really attractive when you have a deadline. Like, wow,
Right? Suddenly, like cleaning out your sink feels
Mhm.
really great, or you're like, oh, I could do the gutters, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, um, so this one's about the is about buried secrets. It's about the past and its tenacity. And it's about sort of the ghosts of old California. So I guess I look at that and I look at theme first, and then I say, okay, well, how can I tell a story that goes with a theme that I find interesting and that hopefully readers will engage with as well. So yeah, I start with theme.
That's no, that's really great to hear because every writer is different in where they begin with that, whether it's an image or for you a theme, or other ones it's a line or a character pops into their head, and it's a reassurance to aspiring writers out there, or aspiring published writers,
Mhm.
that you can start anywhere. And so I'm curious too. You mentioned doing research and like learning new information. Do you have like a nugget of a fun fact or something like that in the research of this book that you want to share,
The one
whether
I'm
you've
working
used it or not?
Oh, sure. The one I'm working on now.
I either what you're working on now, or the book we're
Yeah.
celebrating tonight.
I just spoke to a police lieutenant who told me that criminals have actually adapted now to the COVID masks and are using the little metal wire, the nose wire now to pick handcuffs.
Oh my gosh,
Isn't that
that's like
terrific?
slightly terrifying and so smart at the same time.
And I know I said to him, wait, these guys could be in the space program if they, it's like a shame. This is really creative. It's just, so I learned that. I thought, wow, that's really neat. My book takes place post-COVID because I don't want to have to deal with that stuff.
There you go.
It's a huge headache, by the way, because it's not a fun thing to have to think about when you're writing, is this, because it's like it's just so unpleasant, so and tragic and sad, and it's like so I'm envisioning a post-COVID world when I write. It just makes it easy. So I talk about it in the past tense, but maybe I could throw that in somewhere because that's like too good.
That is too good. That is really good. I like that a lot. I'm curious too about your writing in COVID. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
the elephant in the room of every conversation. It's why we're virtual right now and
Yeah.
not in the actual bookstore. And so how has it affected your writing? Has it helped because you've gotten a lot of time? Is it hindering because you're drained? What has that been like creatively for you?
You know, I think uh, I think the hardest part is the motivation, because you don't expect, you do have, it's not like I had a bubbly social life before this happened, but
Yeah.
obviously now it's far more muted. And so you do have more time technically, but you try to, it's like with that time, you're already alone so much. You don't really want to go be alone more. So the toughest thing, I think, is motivating myself. So I set a daily quota, like I normally do, but I usually will actually wait now until my family goes to bed, because otherwise it's too lonely. I don't want to not see them during the day. So I usually don't start now until around 8:39 at night, and then
Wow.
I write to about midnight or 1, and then I got to get up and go to work the next morning. But it's working, and I know I'll be done on time, but that's the hard part, is the
Yes.
motivation.
Fingers crossed, especially when you're on a deadline.
Mhm.
And so I want to I want to quickly talk about the different perspectives and the different sidelines and story. It's not sidelines, but it's the different perspectives in this story that you talk about it and the multiple layers that you have in there. Was there any perspective that you didn't get to share in this story that you wanted to? Because you talk about the political side, you have, you know, the detective side. Like, was there a layer that you didn't quite get to add, or that you might have to save for later?
You know, I was actually really pleased with it. I was able to, I think I was able to get in everything I wanted to get into it. I've heard, so, you know, the critical response, that folks who didn't like the book or didn't connect with it, what they pointed out was they didn't like the fact that the series of murders that kicks off the action didn't end up being the, I guess you'd say, the ultimate point of the book.
Right, like the center point, yeah.
Right. And in my opinion, though, I just didn't, I think the genre is so saturated with serial killer stories that I didn't want to write just a serial killer story. That doesn't interest me, and I feel like the genre has been glamorized and oversaturated. I want to talk about the effects and how another bad guy could use that to further his own ends. So for those who didn't like it, I understand why, but I wanted to do something different. And so it wasn't a mistake. It was a deliberate choice not to go down that road again.
Well, I know that my little opinion doesn't account for much, but I appreciated that it was different. And
Of
I
course.
liked that there was that, again, like you said, that there was just more layers to it. And the fact that it wasn't a serial killer story, there was more to it. And I appreciated that a lot. And I know that other readers are going to too.
Thank you.
So my pleasure. I want to turn over the conversation to some of our people that we have here in the chat who have questions. So if you have questions for Joseph about the writing process or his books or magic or dancing, because I still haven't asked you about ballroom dancing yet, but if you have any questions about that, please type them in the chat that is right next to the screen that you're watching us on. So this is a good one to start off with. Why did you decide to write books and not screenplays or TV, since you seem to have parents that come from that background?
Well, that I did. I did try. I did try.
Okay.
What I found with that, and it's not that I didn't enjoy it, I did. And I actually sold 2 projects, but they didn't get produced. And so, you know, selling them was one thing, and then it has to go, you know, then they have to decide, are they going to make it?
Right.
And so what happens there that's really rough is basically, you know, you wait around months and months and months. And then, you know, the answer 999 times out of 1,000 was going to be no. And I felt like I was losing the best years of my writing life to projects that, you know, were just dying. And you don't even always get a no. Sometimes you just don't hear anything. And then 6 months pass and a year passes, and it's demoralizing. But I really tried, and I might eventually get back into that sort of thing, but I would rather start from a place of having a deal in place. But to write spec scripts, meaning that you're writing them speculatively,
Yes,
is really tough. So I thought, well, why don't I write a novel? Because if I write a novel, then okay, I've got it and it's mine, and I can send it out. And if even it doesn't go anywhere, it's not wasted because I have it as a calling card. It's no effort is ever wasted if it's done sincerely. And so it was a deliberate decision to say, well, what can I do on my own time, where, you know, I'm really more my own boss about it. But yeah, that's basically the answer.
No, I think that's awesome. I think it's also true. It's very sincere, and it's something that goes to show that you are still a storyteller at your heart. Just because you changed formats doesn't mean that you changed what you loved, and
Right.
that other people should be able to see that, you know, and see that reflected. So thank you for that.
You have a lot of freedom, and I encourage any of, you know, to think about that if you're considering writing, that you do have so much more freedom there. And also, I like to write prose. I like to write those descriptive passages that not everybody loves to read, but I do like writing them. So you get to do that more with, novels.
I apologize for my eye roll. I am not a prose person. Give me dialogue any day of the week. And I want like Aaron Sorkin, Neil Simon, snaps back and forth. That's what I want.
Well, those guys are perfect. Yeah.
Anyway, so here's another question. This is a fun one. Are you ever going to put ballroom dancing or magic in one of your mysteries, do you think?
Oh man. I've thought about it. Shoot. Ballroom dance, man, what a world that is.
I'm sure, unfortunately, a lot of people, their context is Dancing with the Stars,
Yeah.
but I'm sure it's a very different world than what we're given on there. And there's a lot of competitions that go into it and the training, and it's a different type of storytelling too.
It sure is. I love dance. I miss it. Normally I teach dance during the week. I haven't done that in a while. But would I put in a mystery? I don't know. I've thought about it. Magic might work a little bit better, but I don't know how I would do it.
Yeah.
But I do put in proposition betting. Proposition betting are seemingly impossible bets that if you know the secret to them, they're usually not too difficult to do. But if you don't know the secret, then they sound impossible. And that's, they're called sucker bets or proposition bets. So I do put some of those in to my stories. And I've got a couple in this one that's going to be coming out. So nice. It's what we call a kindred art. It's not really magic per se, but cards, certainly. I used to do gambling demonstrations. I'd show how to, not get ripped off in a game of poker or something. And second dealing, hopping the cut, false shuffles, false cuts. I mean, it's a lot of fun. So I might put more stuff like that in con games. I find that
definitely like some character, some CI, something that's
a CI. Yeah, I could do that. Sure.
Well, again, use what you know, right? You got this plethora of knowledge. That's a great question. This is an interesting one. Did you pull any inspiration from real life serial killers like the Night Stalker, which is that documentary just came out on Netflix?
Excellent documentary.
Yeah, that's a really good question.
Yeah. So the Night Stalker, he was just a nightmare in the flesh. Yeah, I did. I thought about him because he struck when I was in preschool.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And no, I didn't know at the time, really. I mean, grown-ups were, hinky, but it didn't really at the time, it didn't really affect me in a conscious way. But it really was a city of fear for about a year there, because he was so brazen, so violent, and he appeared to have no, he was so unpredictable.
Yeah.
But the bit about people painting their houses to avoid being targeted, that did happen in LA. I forget what color people thought he was striking, certain colors. So that people would paint their houses, guard dogs. There was, backup and guard dogs for backlog for, months. And anyway, yeah, the Night Stalker was definitely influential in terms of the effect it had on the city. Yeah, he was but it's a good documentary. I recommend it. They interviewed the guys who helped to catch him.
Yeah. No, it's a good documentary, but I think it was in reference to the fact that they're both LA, and the documentary had the series Under Pressure, which is similar to your book. It's a different tone that they take with it, but yeah, I can see where those connections would be made. So with your background, do you see your novel as a film in LA while you're writing? If so, do you have actors in mind for stars when you're writing your characters?
No, these are amazing questions, folks.
I know, they're doing great.
I mean, obviously I'd be very flattered if anyone was interested in optioning it. I'm not sure. I try to write cinematically, I have a little trick where I try to put at least one sensory description on each page. Um, and so I try to write in a way that's immersive and exciting. Um, I visualize scenes as I write them as if they are being, framed. Like, where are they sitting? Where geography within scenes is important to me because I feel that it's grounding. But there are no immediate plans. As far as actors are concerned, um, you know, my main character Tully isn't, it's a he looks like a guy I know. I saw this guy, and I was like, God, I like this way this guy looks. He'd be interesting if he were a police officer. People wouldn't necessarily think he would be very formidable, But I haven't really thought about. I mean, if this were 30 years ago, I'd say, oh, it'd be cool to have Jeff Goldblum do it. But as it is now, it would be cool, right? As it is now, I don't have anyone in mind. But that's a great question.
You might just have to find like that next nerdy who is Jeff Goldblum-esque. You know what I mean?
Right.
We haven't found him yet. He's in his greenhouse of dreams that we gotta pull him out.
Yeah.
So here's another good one. So you have an MFA in creative nonfiction. How did you translate what you learned there to fiction writing?
Well, I've always been amused by the designation of that degree, creative nonfiction. Sounds. I mean, I'm not. I don't even really know what that means. But that is indeed.
That's funny.
That is indeed what it says on the degree, and that's what I signed up to do. So it wasn't really that much of a stretch because we were asked, most of our writing that we did in that program was, memoir stuff. You write about experiences in your own life, you tend to, but from a creative standpoint, I mean, I'm not really sure, but I actually began my first book in that program.
Okay.
Not in the creative nonfiction portion, but in one of the separate classes I had to take to fill out the degree, and it was a fiction workshop. So I guess that does answer it. And the teacher was Professor Leslie Tenorio, who's a Filipino-American author. He's written a terrific book called Monstrous, which is a collection of short stories from a Filipino-American perspective.
Monstrous?
Mm-hmm, Monstrous. And he's a tremendous writer. He's a tremendous teacher. And it was in his class, it was his prompt that got me started on One Day You'll Burn, because he said, it was our homework assignment, write a scene dealing with the world-weary cop cliche, but with a fresh approach. Okay. And so that's how I came up with my character of Detective Morales, who's Tully's partner. And he was actually the first character I wrote, but I wrote the scene at with the burned body in the middle of Hollywood Boulevard. I wrote that in that class. So Professor Tenorio was a big inspiration to me. And all the other teachers in that program were great, but that was the class that got that particular piece going.
Yeah. Oh no, that's really great to hear. And I love book recommendations. I'm like, give them all to me. I love discovering new work, especially by BIPOC authors. So I hate the idea of closing out at all, because I'm actually really enjoying this, and I'm finding that we have a lot in common, which is fun. Always fun in an author interview. But this is always one of my favorite questions to ask, kind of a la James Lipton style. But what did this book teach you? Either something about yourself as a writer. You already shared some fun facts with us, but maybe another fun fact that you didn't get to share before. What did this book teach you? What did you learn from it?
I learned that this is about as dark as I want to go, and I don't really want to go this dark again. And I have some stuff in the third one that's pretty intense, but I decided that I really want to dedicate more of my life to messages of uplift, love, and resilience. I don't want to contribute to ugliness. So hopefully, and I'm not saying the book does so at all, but I do think that, but just for me personally, I find this increasingly challenging to write this kind of material. And so what I'm hoping is that the book, it helped me become more resilient. So I guess, but also to find out kind of where I want to go next with myself and my work. I would love, my day job, I teach fifth grade, and I love being a teacher, and I love my students, and I would like to write a book, more of like a how to teach with greater energy and passion, and with all of my lesson plans and my tests and my approach to teaching history, science, and language arts.
Yeah.
So that's really what I would, if I wrote a non-mystery next, that's what I would like to do. But even if I write another mystery, I'd like to, it felt good to tie up this book with a message of resilience and the power of the mind over darkness. And I would like to do more of that.
I love that. Thank you for that honesty. But now learning that you're a teacher, there's one question that did pop up here that I have to ask now. How are you passing on your rich legacy of reading and writing to the next generation?
Kids are very practical. They want to know when they sit in front of you, what is an education going to do for me?
Yeah.
And I think we suffer, education suffers because it's compulsory, and it should be, but it suffers because imagine if you had a stand-up comic who didn't need to be funny because the government made the audience attend his or her shows, right? So we have that with teaching as well, that it's easy to fall into a place of complacency and not selling it. But imagine, what I asked myself is, what if my kids got to pick their teachers? What if you got to go to whatever teacher you wanted to, starting at, first grade? How would I rate? Would I fill my class? So I have to sell myself as, I have to show my students what an education is going to do for them, how it enriches the life. You really do have to lead by example in education. I think the student has to look at what you're doing and say, I want to do that. So I call it you kind of got to think of yourself as you do have to think of yourself as a performer in a way, but every teacher represents the benefit of an education. So my passion for reading and story is I also keep up to date on everything my kids are reading. I try to read what they read, watch the movies they watch, try to be up on all of that stuff, which is great because I just got to watch The Mandalorian because of my fifth graders, and I ended up, I thought it was spectacular. So it was a lot of fun. So I got to, but in terms of my legacy, I don't think I'm being very eloquent about what I mean.
Oh no, you're doing great. The idea of leading by example is huge. I loved that idea of, if students got to pick their teachers, would you be picked? You know what I mean? It sets yourself at a standard, and that's huge, because then kids set themselves up at that standard that they want to be great too. Because a bad teacher can make or break a subject that a kid loves that they might want to enjoy. So that's admirable and huge. So yes, you're being very eloquent. I'm sorry I interrupted you.
Not at all. Not at all. Not at all. I'm working with Rotary, our local Rotary Club, to implement a program for incarcerated youth, which we're going to begin as soon as the pandemic ends. But the idea is that I'll be able to go into juvenile hall and teach writing to kids who could really benefit from that.
That's awesome.
And I'm going to take a similar approach there, and trying to again show by example how fun it is and how rich life can become when you have a really powerful voice. And so we plan on doing that, hopefully by the summer.
Well, I think that's amazing. That's wonderful to hear. And thank you, Meg, for that question. That's who asked it. I think it was an even better question than my what did this book teach you one to end on, especially given your history and the fact that you have children and new fifth graders. And that's awesome to hear. And the influence that your parents had on you with storytelling. So how you can pass that on. Joseph, this has been amazing and so much fun to get to know you more and talk to you. Thank you again for honoring us with your time and your book. I want to give people a chance, I want to give you a chance to remind people who you are, where they can find you online, any other little thing that you want to throw out there before we end tonight.
Sure. Joseph Schneider, you can, I would love to hear from any of you who have any questions. I can be found at jschneiderbooks.com. And I sent some book plates into Tattered Cover, but if for some reason they run out or anyone else wants them, I'm happy to correspond with you and get those out to you. It's my great honor to talk to all of you folks, and I really appreciate you taking the time to join us. Thank you so much.
Yes.
And thank you, Kaylee.
It's my pleasure.
You're incredible. You're a terrific interviewer. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate you saying that. That means a lot. I enjoy it, and I enjoy getting to hear your stories, and thank you for your honesty. That made the interview all the better. So I want to thank you guys again for joining us this Friday night. You can get your copies of Joseph's new book, What Waits for You, at Tattered Cover Bookstore. And he mentioned that if you order from us, we can get you signed book plates, which is very exciting, a nice little bonus that you might get from buying locally and supporting a local independent bookstore. We really appreciate that. You can get the first one too. We have that book in stock. One day you'll burn if you want to read both of them. They're both really good, I promise. But that being said, we want to thank you guys again for joining us this evening. You can shop online at tatteredcover.com and check out our upcoming events at tatteredcover.com/events. Joseph, if you'll hang out here while I close this out. Thank you guys once again. You guys have been wonderful and so supportive in this community. My name is McKaylee. I'm with Tattered Cover Bookstore. Stay safe, everyone, and happy reading. Thanks, everybody.